They erased her name before she even left the building. No warning. No discussion. Just a 9:00 a.m. realignment strategy. Meeting with no agenda and too many suits on the Zoom call. When Avery Quinn walked into that glass conference room, she already knew something was wrong. No coffee on the table, HR sitting too still. And Derek Sloan Orbita's new COO smiling like he was about to euthanize a pet and call it growth. End of second. You've done exceptional work, Avery, he began, tone syrupy with fake empathy. But with the upcoming IPO, we're streamlining all non-core roles. Translation? You're fired, but we're keeping everything you built. By 10:15, her Slack was deactivated. By noon, her badge stopped working. By 2:00 p.m., her laptop was remote, wiped. And by sunset, her name had vanished from every commit log, every design file, every product note. It was like watching your own obituary get typed line by people who used to high-five you in the hallway. They didn't just let her go. They tried to delete her. But here's what they didn't know. The predictive routing engine, the beating heart of Orbita's entire logistics platform? She had filed the provisional patent under her own name, through her personal LLC, nearly a year before the company officially integrated it. They scrubbed her user access. But they forgot who built the floor they're standing on. Avery sat in her kitchen that night, tea gone cold, fingers trembling not from fear, but from restraint. She could go public. Tweet the receipts, burn it all down. But something inside whispered, not yet. This wasn't over. It hadn't even started. Have you ever been erased from something you helped create? Drop a comment below. Someone else might need to hear your story too. Avery didn't speak to anyone from Orbita for months after the day they cut her out. Not because she couldn't, because she refused. At first, it was survival. She spent the first few days doing nothing, no code, no calls, no caffeine-fueled midnight debugging. Just her couch, a growing army of dishes in the sink, and the unfamiliar sound of silence. No Slack pings. No Jira updates. No passive-aggressive emails disguised as collaboration. She'd been plugged in for so long, she didn't know how to sit still. But eventually, stillness stopped feeling like punishment. It became clarity. By the second week, she was breathing deeper, walking further, sleeping past 6 a.m. for the first time in years. Her friends, what few remained, started to reappear. Come out, Priya texted. Happy hours on me. And don't you dare say you have a deploy. She laughed, almost out loud. The code still called to her, though quietly, like a muscle twitch she couldn't ignore. So she picked up freelance work, a few small fintech gigs, cleaning up SQL disasters from companies who thought normalized database meant putting everything into one Excel sheet. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well. And best of all, it was hers. She worked barefoot, in yoga pants, half wrapped in a weighted blanket while her giant monstera plant stretched its vines across the window. She answered to no one, drank her coffee hot, took afternoon walks just because she could. And she didn't think about Derek, or Orbita, or the predictive engine they were now parading around in pitch decks like it had fallen from the sky. Except she did. Late at night, around 11:30, when the world quieted and the noise of the day gave way to something more dangerous, memory. She'd find herself scrolling through LinkedIn, her cursor hovering over Derek's latest post. Disruption starts with vision, but scales with leadership. She'd close the tab, then open it again, then close it harder, as if the laptop would feel her fury. She didn't post, didn't comment, didn't Raj, but she kept screenshots. And the folder on her desktop named Northbridge, IP control, grew slowly, line by line, day by day. Screenshots of stolen UI elements. Archived emails from her Orbita account. Old time-stamped code snippets. A backup of the original patent submission. And, most importantly, a digital record of everything she'd built under her name before they rewrote history. She wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. She wasn't even sure she wanted to act. But something about watching them grow fat off her sleepless nights stirred a quiet resolve. Like standing outside your own house while strangers throw a party inside and pretend you never lived there. So she watched, waited, and prepared. Let them celebrate. Let them enjoy the fruits of her silence. Because silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. And Avery Quinn was very, very good at strategy. She didn't need anyone's permission to exist. She just needed the right moment to remind them why they needed her in the first place. 6 months after Avery was erased, Derek Sloan became the face of Orbita. Not just the COO, the visionary leader behind their entire logistics AI strategy. The man who streamlined innovation and architected disruption. That's how the headlines read, anyway. Avery saw the first article on a Monday. It popped up in her newsfeed between an ad for noise-canceling headphones and a viral video about dogs playing piano. The headline was simple, sterile, infuriating. How Orbita Systems built the future of fulfillment. There he was. Derek. In a navy blazer and white sneakers, arms crossed in front of a digital rendering of the very interface Avery had designed in her apartment while wrapped in a heating pad. She stared at the image for a long time. Not because she didn't recognize it, but because she did. Down to the button placement. Down to the error message style. They hadn't even changed the font. He gave interviews. Talked about agile pivots and predictive mesh routing and leveraging modular autonomy. He spoke like he'd written every line of code himself, like he'd ever once stayed up until 3 a.m. trying to debug a collapsing node tree in a live database. He hadn't. Avery had. And the silence in her apartment grew heavier with each clip, each quote, each polished lie packaged as strategy. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She copied the article into her folder, labeled it, Derek Claims, Media 001. Then the TEDx talk dropped. It was called Scaling with Integrity, How We Built Orbita from the Ground Up. 12 minutes of buzzwords wrapped in charm. And somewhere around minute 6, he gestured toward a slide. The slide showed a simplified version of the engine schematic Avery had drawn on a whiteboard in her kitchen 2 years ago. She paused the video. Zoomed in. Her original axis labels were still there. He hadn't even bothered to rename them. That night, she sat alone in her office. Lights dimmed, the glow of the monitor flickering against her face. Her tea had gone cold again. The Monstera plant loomed large behind her, silent witness to it all. There was a weight in her chest, but it wasn't grief anymore. It was fuel. She clicked through his LinkedIn page. He'd gained over 10,000 followers in the last month. Comment after comment praised his humble leadership, his hands-on product vision, his deep technical insight. Avery snorted. He didn't even know what a constraint solver was. She'd had to explain it to him twice, and he still called it that thing that fixes roots. But now, to the outside world, Derek was the genius. The builder. The one who'd taken an idea and turned it into a billion-dollar pre-IPO unicorn. And Avery? She was a ghost. But ghosts don't sleep. They wait. They gather every whispered credit stolen, every false claim made, every name that doesn't belong. They remember. And eventually, if you push them far enough, ghosts come back to reclaim the house. Avery hadn't planned on attending the Logistics Tech Summit in Austin. She hated conferences too loud, too performative, too full of overconfident founders pitching half-finished ideas with polished decks and rented shoes. But Priya had already booked her ticket. You've been hiding in that apartment for months, she said, sliding the email across their cafe table. Go, network, or at least drink something that wasn't made in your kitchen. So, Avery went. She showed up to the third night of the summit wearing a black jacket and jeans, her hair tied back, and a look that said, I'm not here to impress you. I'm here because someone insisted I leave the house. The venue smelled like spilled beer, burnt coffee, and ambition. Too many lanyards. Too many business cards. Too many people pretending to change the world with serverless APIs. She found a seat at the back bar, ordered a whiskey sour that tasted like regret and lemon concentrate, and started scrolling through her phone, half checking her inbox, half doom-scrolling industry news. That's when a voice to her left said, "That's not real bourbon. Hope you know that." She turned, eyebrow raised. The man beside her looked like he hadn't shaved in 3 days. Gray stubble, slightly crooked glasses, a conference badge flipped backward, and a blazer thrown over a Johnny Cash t-shirt. He looked out of place, which instantly made him more trustworthy. "I've had worse," she replied, sipping anyway. "Avery Quinn, right?" he asked, squinting at her badge. "Caught your panel earlier. You roasted that guy from Velicent. Nice work." She smirked. He kept calling Ram Cloud Speed. "I couldn't let it go." He chuckled, deep and dusty. "Name's Elliot. IP litigation consultant. I used to chase patent trolls for a living." That made her pause. She set her glass down. "IP, huh? 20 years. Mostly startups, occasionally dragons." They talked. Not about trauma, not yet, but about burnouts, bloated org charts, AI ethics, and the myth of meritocracy in venture-funded tech. The kind of conversation that only happens at 1:05 p.m. when everyone's tired of pretending to be their LinkedIn bios. Eventually, she mentioned Orbita. Lightly. Carefully. "Long story short," she said, eyes fixed on the ice in her glass. "They wiped me out, fired me, scrubbed my name from everything, claimed my work, even tried to refile patents." Elliot froze mid-sip. "Wait, refile?" "Yeah." She shrugged. "Filed the provisional under my LLC, just in case. Didn't assign it. They're using it anyway." His tone shifted. No longer casual. Focused. "You have the filing number?" She hesitated, then pulled out her phone and showed him the PDF. He zoomed in, mouth tight. "Filed through Quinn Analytics, LLC. Timestamp predates Orbita's incorporation." He looked up, eyes suddenly sharp. "This is clean. Avery, you still own the core. The functional method. They don't own the foundation." Her world stopped for a second. The room kept buzzing around her, but all she could hear was her pulse, one sentence echoing in her mind. "You still own the foundation. If you found out they built everything on something you still legally own, what would you do?" Comment below your story might help someone else find their voice. She didn't smile. Not yet. But for the first time in a long time, Avery Quinn exhaled and the breath didn't shake. Avery didn't sleep much after Austin. Not because she was upset. Because she was thinking clear, sharp, methodical. It felt like a switch had been flipped in the back of her brain. Not Ray. Not Ravenna. Just alignment. Like a machine finally running the way it was built to. She spent the flight back to Seattle sketching structures in her notebook, legal ones, not code. Shell companies. IP holding frameworks. Jurisdiction routing. Every note felt like a gear sliding into place. By the time she walked into her apartment, the monster plant drooping slightly by the window, she didn't even take off her coat. She sat down at her desk, opened a new document, and titled it in bold. Northbridge Equinox LLC. IP strategy. She needed distance from Quinn Analytics. That name was too obvious. Too easy to trace back. So she built a new identity. A clean one. She registered Northbridge Equinox in Delaware, listed a P.O. box in Utah, named a nominee director through a legal firm she found 3 clicks deep in a patent law subreddit. Elliot helped, quietly. Pointed her toward the right language. The right people. The kind of lawyers who never advertised but always answered in full sentences. Within 10 days, Northbridge Equinox was real. Avery, legally, was now just advisor. A ghost in her own machine. Exactly the way she wanted it. Then came the filing. She didn't just dust off the old provisional patent. She rewrote the entire spec line by linear-refining every detail of the predictive routing algorithm she'd once sketched on a napkin. She added new components. Modular logic structures she'd developed in her freelance gigs. Optimization branches they'd never even touched at Orbita. This was no longer just protection. It was proof that the original mind behind the engine still existed, still evolved, still owned the blueprint. She filed the full application through Northbridge Equinox, time-stamped, encrypted, then waited. Orbita didn't notice. Of course they didn't. They were too busy prepping champagne slides for their Series D deck. Too busy shaking hands, smiling for cameras, selling something they didn't truly understand. Avery didn't stop there. She set up keyword alerts, subscribed to their investor updates under a pseudonym, even joined a public Orbita developer Slack channel using a fake profile. Leah Monroe, Logistics Ops Consultant, Tallahassee. She asked questions, gave feedback, took notes. Every response they gave her very line of marketing copy they posted about their proprietary AI engine, she screenshotted. She wasn't watching anymore. She was recording. Her desktop filled with folders, labeled by date, topic, contact. She color-coded each one. Evidence, marketing claims, timeline gaps, press clippings. She even began charting out the inconsistencies between Derek's public statements and the actual functionality of the system. It was tedious. And it was glorious. She didn't need to shout. She didn't need to warn them. She was sharpening something far more dangerous than anger. Documentation. Because Avery knew one thing better than most. In tech, charisma gets you in the room. But the receipts? The receipts decide who stays. Avery became a shadow inside the very system that had erased her. It started with a Slack invite. Orbita had launched a community workspace for logistics developers, part of a new open innovation initiative to generate hype for their upcoming IPO. Anyone with an industry background could request access. And Avery, through the carefully crafted identity of Leah Monroe, just another ops consultant from Florida, was approved within 48 hours. She chose the name carefully common, forgettable, and just distinctive enough to pass a background check she knew they wouldn't run. Her profile picture was an AI-generated headshot. Her LinkedIn, a polished shell filled with vague job titles and soft endorsements from other fake profiles she'd spent a weekend building. Inside, the workspace was exactly what she expected. Buzzwords. Cheerleading. Surface-level Q, Orbita employees chimed in, often eager to show off, eager to convert community chatter into investor optimism. Leah asked smart, simple questions. Things like, how does the dynamic mesh adjust for warehouse capacity drift? Or, is the core engine modular or rule-driven? They answered, publicly, confidently, and every answer was a gift. Because almost all of them contradicted the system's actual logic, the one Avery had written. The one only she knew by heart. She took screenshots of everything. Names, timestamps, version numbers. At night, she compared their claims to the patent she'd just filed under Northbridge Equinox. The gaps were widening. The lies were stacking. But the part that truly amazed her was how casual they were. Orbita employees bragged in threads about restructuring outdated logic and rewriting legacy spaghetti, as if their entire platform hadn't been built by a woman now quietly watching them from a fake avatar 3 time zones away. Sometimes, they even mocked her direct, though they didn't know it. One mid-level product lead named Sean posted, "Tore out that legacy routing module last quarter. System finally breathes. Can't believe we ever shipped that mess." Avery read the message twice, then added it to her folder. Public statements, derogatory claims, Sean, tech lead, PDF. She didn't flinch, didn't reply. She just watched. She watched them build layer upon layer of confidence atop a structure they didn't own, like squatters redecorating a house and calling themselves architects. What they didn't realize, what they couldn't imagine, was that the foundation still had an owner. And that owner had receipts. Avery kept her tone light, her questions friendly. She even gave helpful feedback sometimes, just to build trust. But with every passing day, every new post, every additional slide leaked through public investor decks, she saw the same flaw repeating. They truly believed she was gone. And that made them reckless. Not loud. Not foolish. Just confident enough to forget that systems, especially the fragile kind built on borrowed code and borrowed credit, don't fall apart because of big mistakes. They implode because of quiet truths no one wants to deal with. And Avery was now the quietest truth in their entire empire. The first red flag didn't come from Slack or LinkedIn. It came from the footnote of a legal document buried in a quarterly investor update tone that no one outside the due diligence team was likely to read. But Avery read it. Line by line, twice. She always read the fine print. IP consolidation strategy. Phase 2. Internal realignment of pre-IPO proprietary assets scheduled for Q4 filing. To anyone else, that would have sounded like corporate wallpaper. To Avery, it sounded like a bomb ticking under the floorboards. She opened a spreadsheet she hadn't touched in weeks, titled Asset Flow, Risk Triggers. There, in column C, she listed all the warning signs she'd created for herself. Asset realignment was number 4. She closed the document. Saturday back. Let the weight of it settle. They were going to move the patent. Not just use it, but absorb it, fold it quietly into an internal structure, claim full ownership, and file it under a name that had never built it, never touched it, never even understood how it worked. It was the final move. The last quiet sweep of the broom meant to erase her from every corner of their empire. The countdown had started. And then, as if the universe couldn't help itself, a message popped into her burner inbox 3 days later. It was from someone named Trevor. She recognized the name instantly. Junior systems engineer, barely a year at Orbita when she was still there. Nervous, kind, always asked too many questions. She once taught him how to write a recursive loop without crashing half the system. His message was short. They're transferring the patent next Friday. You didn't hear it from me. She stared at the screen. Not in panic. Not even in shock. Just with the kind of cold, practiced clarity of someone who had seen this moment coming from 10 miles out. She typed back, "Understood. Are you safe?" He replied, "Safer than Derek's lawyers will be after next week." She smiled, just a twitch of the corner of her mouth. Then she got to work. She reviewed every document she'd filed under Northbridge Equinox, checked every timestamp, every proof of chain of custody. She made copies, backups, legal readiness folders, sent a quiet message to Elliot. "They're making the move. I'm ready." Then she opened one more document. Blank. Waiting. She typed a single sentence at the top. "To whom it may concern. Any attempt to transfer patent IDX 9478112 without the written consent of Northbridge Equinox LLC will be considered unlawful and pursued accordingly." It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't grief. It was timing. Precision. The sound of a blade sliding into its sheath, not to be waved, but to be used. Orbita thought they were making their final move. What they didn't realize was that Avery had been waiting for this exact day. Avery didn't write the letter in anger. She wrote it in silence, with a calm that unnerved even her. The apartment was quiet that morning. No background music, no coffee brewing. Just the soft tap of her fingers on the keys and the occasional creak of her chair as she shifted to reread every line. She wasn't rushing. This wasn't a tweet. This wasn't a thread designed to go viral. This was Warwidged in the most boring font imaginable. 1 Point Times New Roman. She wrote, "To whom it may concern. This letter serves as formal notification that patent ID X947812, currently under review for internal transfer by Orbita Systems Holdings, remains the sole intellectual property of Northbridge Equinox LLC. Any attempt to reassign, repurpose, or integrate this patent without express written consent from the holder will be considered unlawful and will be pursued accordingly. We remain open to initiating a licensing discussion. Regards. Legal Counsel. Northbridge Equinox LLC." She stared at the page. Reread it. Not a single word of anger. No threats. No drama. Just the kind of sentence that clears boardrooms and spikes heart rates in legal departments. Then she added one more detail. Something small, something intentional. At the bottom of the letter, in the footer where few people look unless they're nervous, she placed Registered Agent of Record. A. Quinn, Director of IP Strategy. No mask. No alias. No shell. Just her name. Let them see it. Let them feel it. They tried to erase her. Now she was on their letterhead. She printed 3 copies, scanned one to PDF, encrypted it, and then emailed it directly to Orbita's general counsel, CCing their external IP firm and just for fun the SEC's IPO compliance inbox. Then she closed the laptop and waited. It didn't take long. By noon, she got 3 red receipts. By 3:00 p.m., she got a ping from Trevor. Legal's in full meltdown. Emergency meetings. Derek pacing like a lunatic. She didn't reply. Just steeped another cup of tea. By 6:00 p.m., Orbita's official Twitter account announced the postponement of their IPO livestream, citing unexpected technical considerations. Avery read it once, sipped her tea, and whispered, "Technical, indeed." Behind closed doors, the panic was spreading. The legal team was clawing through filings. Compliance was demanding timelines. Investors were calling. And Derek? Derek was shouting questions no one could answer. Who the hell is Northbridge Equinox? Why didn't we catch this earlier? Why is her name on this? Because you never looked, she thought. You never once considered the possibility that the woman you erased still had the power to stop your entire empire in its tracks with a single page and the right timing. And the best part? She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't called anyone out online. She hadn't threatened. She'd simply stated the truth in perfect legal grammar and signed it. Not with emotion, but with control. The IPO launch call was scheduled for Thursday at 1:00 a.m. sharp. It was invite only. Suits and high-level investors. Compliance officers. Press contacts handpicked for their friendly coverage. The entire event had been rehearsed to the second. Every sentence scripted. Every slide timed. Every executive smile practiced in the mirror, just enough to feel authentic, but not too real to seem desperate. Avery wasn't invited. At least not directly. But she didn't need an invitation. At 9:47 a.m., a new name appeared in the Zoom waiting room. R. Bloom. Northbridge Equinox Holdings. Camera off. Mic muted. Just a name. Just a presence. The kind that makes legal teams sweat and compliance departments reach for bottled water. At 9:52, a private Slack message was sent from Derek to legal. Who the hell is that? Can she speak? Can she stop this? Legal didn't answer. They were too busy double-checking the filings. And yes, she could speak. And yes, she had that power. But Avery didn't speak. Not yet. She waited, perfectly still, as the final minutes ticked down. The call hit capacity. 3 participants. Each face framed in tidy little rectangles. Each grin a little too tight. Each breath held just a little too long. At exactly 1:00 a.m., Derek appeared on screen in a navy blazer and a fresh haircut. He smiled like nothing was wrong. "Good morning, everyone," he began. "We're excited to formally begin Orbita Systems' journey into the public market. Today is about innovation, about integrity, and about the vision we've built together." And somewhere off-screen, someone clicked to slide 2. Proprietary AI engine. Core IP. Secured. And then, a cough. Not literal, but digital. The SEC's senior compliance officer unmuted. "Before we proceed," he said, adjusting his glasses, "we'd like clarification on one item. Patent IDX 9477812, listed as central to Orbita's routing engine. Can the company confirm its ownership status?" Derek's smile flickered. "Only slightly. Yes, Of course, he said, voice smoothing out like butter on burnt toast. That patent was developed in house. Fully transferred, fully integrated. And then the compliance officer turned. Miss Bloom, would you care to comment? All eyes shifted to her square. Avery unmuted. Her camera came on. No fancy background. No filters. Just a black turtleneck. Bare face. Hair pulled back. Calm eyes that didn't blink. She spoke slowly, clearly like she was reading a weather report that happened to end careers. Yes, I'm the registered owner of patent X9478812. It was filed under my LLC in 2020. It has never been reassigned. And Orbita never requested transfer. The silence that followed was thick. Uncomfortable. Beautiful. Derek opened his mouth. Then closed it. Then opened it again. No sound came out. One board member blinked rapidly and left the call. Another pretended to freeze. The compliance officer nodded. We'll be placing a temporary hold on this IPO pending verification. Mr. Sloan, I'd advise your legal team to confer immediately. The Zoom chat exploded off screen. Slack channel lit up. Derek's frame vanished. Avery didn't log off. She just sat there, still on camera, sipping from a plain white mug that read, "World's okayest engineer." She didn't come to scream. She didn't come to beg. She came to watch the room they'd built without her realize it stood on her name. What would you do if they stole your work and tried to erase your name, then watched you return with legal firepower? Tell us in the comments. And if this hit you deep, subscribe to Revenge Talaswave got more where this came from. The day after the IPO call collapsed, the tech blogs smelled blood. At first, it was just whispers, anonymous sources, delayed launch rumors, vague murmurs about documentation irregularities. But then someone leaked the Zoom attendee list, and suddenly the name Northbridge Equinox was everywhere. Within 72 hours, every industry outlet was digging. Venture Track, Logitech Weekly, even a long-form thread on X titled, "Who Really Built Orbita?" gained traction fast. The headline that stuck came from Wired Capital. The Ghost Founder, How One Woman Froze a $1 billion IPO with a PDF. Avery didn't respond to requests for comment. She didn't need to. The documents spoke for themselves. Orbitus lovers scrambled. The board panicked. Derek? He disappeared from public view. Internally, the company called it a strategic leadership transition. But everyone knew what that meant. Derek Sloan was done. Investors wanted blood, or, at the very least, indemnity. And someone had to pay for the oversight. 1 week after the IPO collapse, Orbita issued a formal statement. We've restructured our leadership to reflect evolving priorities and our commitment to legal integrity. Translation? They finally realized the castle was built on someone else's land, and that land had a name. Avery Quinn. She didn't gloat. Didn't post a single thing. She just updated her archive folder, adding a final PDF. Orbita, CEO, removal. PDF. Then she went for a walk. The trees outside her apartment had just started to turn, flashes of red and orange breaking through green. The air was cool, and quiet, and clean. And for the first time in a long time, her shoulders didn't feel tight. She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't proving anything. She was simply existing. And the world finally had to reckon with that existence. Back inside, her inbox pinged. Not with press. Not with former coworkers crawling back. But with a message from Orbita's legal team. Subject line. Proposal. Settlement terms. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she poured herself a glass of water, sat at her desk, and looked around. The Monstera plant was thriving again. Sticky notes lined the edge of her monitor, bright, chaotic, alive. The logo for Northbridge Equinox glowed faintly in the taskbar corner. She smiled, not big, not smug. Just enough to feel the muscles remember how. Because she didn't just take down a man. She didn't just delay an IPO. She'd proven something most people never get the chance to show. That quiet doesn't mean weak. That calm doesn't mean absent. That just because you were erased doesn't mean you were gone. It just means they couldn't see you. And now, they couldn't move without you. The PDF was 6-7 pages long. Dense, formal, full of polite legal phrasing meant to sound neutral, but Avery could feel the panic pulsing through every paragraph. They called it a mutually beneficial resolution framework. She called it a surrender with formatting. The opening section danced around the Isueno admission of fault, no apology, just paragraph after paragraph of strategic tap dancing meant to reach one goal, get her signature. But Avery didn't rush. She let it sit for 2 days. Made coffee, took her walks, watered the plant. Then, slowly, page by page, she read what they were offering. A perpetual, irrevocable license to use her patented technology. Retroactive royalties dating back to the quarter after her termination. A 2% equity stake in Orbita Holdings. A formal advisory title on the board. Strategic IP advisor. What they were hoping. That she'd accept quietly. That she'd sign and disappear again. That she'd be grateful. But Avery wasn't looking for closure. She was looking for clarity. So she drafted her own one-page response. No red lines. No counter-offers. Just conditions clear, non-negotiable. 1. The license would be granted under her terms, not theirs. 2. Her name would be printed in bold in every official document where the algorithm was mentioned starting with the revised IPO filing. 3. There would be no NDA. No silence clause. No retroactive gag order buried in legalese. She was free to tell her story, whenever and however she chose. 4. She didn't want an apology. She didn't want flowers or phone calls or, "We've always respected your work," emails. She wanted leverage. Permanent, irrevocable, public leverage. Because to her, real victory wasn't a payout. It was walking into any room from now on, and knowing her name was already written in the structure above their heads. When she finally hit send, she didn't wait for a response. She already knew they'd agree. They had no choice. 6 weeks later, the revised IPO filing listed Northbridge Equinox LLC in the Intellectual Property Disclosure section. Her patent ID sat alone in bold on page 4. And, under the new leadership table, beneath a modest black and white headshot, sat the title, Avery Quinn, Strategic IP Advisor. The press noticed. The analysts took notes. And the new CEO? She mentioned Avery in every interview with careful reverence, like someone who'd studied the blueprint and understood not to poke the beam holding the building up. Avery gave exactly one comment to the media. Just one. "I didn't ask for recognition. I asked for accountability. And I documented everything." Then she declined further interviews. No fanfare. No speech. Just her name right where it should have been from the start. Avery didn't watch the bell ring. The morning Orbita finally went public, she didn't refresh stock tickers. Didn't scroll Twitter for reactions. Didn't even open the live stream link sent by 3 different reporters. Instead, she made herself chamomile this time and sat at her kitchen table in silence. The monstera plant by the window caught morning light, its leaves almost glowing. A breeze filtered in through the screen, just enough to stir the sticky notes still clinging to the side of her monitor. She reached for her laptop, opened one folder Final Disclosures and pulled up the revised IPO filing. Her name was there. Page 4. Patent IDX 947812, listed under Northbridge Equinox, with full chain of ownership and time-stamped original filing. She didn't smile. Not fully. It wasn't about being happy. It wasn't about revenge. It was about equilibrium. For the first time in years, things simply felt even. She closed the document, took a long sip, then leaned back in her chair, breathing deep. This wasn't the ending she would have chosen when everything began. She would have preferred recognition without battle, credit without having to prove she was right, peace without paperwork. But life didn't work like that. The truth is, People will take what they think you won't fight to protect. Your time, your work, your name. And sometimes they won't come with threats. They'll come with smiles, vague job titles, and a promise to streamline the vision. Avery learned, painfully, that protecting your value doesn't make you difficult. It makes you conscious. She learned that silence is not weakness. That walking away doesn't mean giving up. And that, just because someone controls the microphone, doesn't mean they own the story. They tried to write her out. To file her under former employee. To tuck her into a paragraph labeled past contributions. But she kept the receipts. And more than that, she understood the system they didn't bother to. That was her greatest weapon. Not noise. Not rage. Competence. Because in a world that often rewards the loudest voice, there's something deeply powerful about the person who doesn't flinch, just waits, documents, and moves precisely when it matters most. Avery didn't want applause. She didn't want sympathy. She wanted what she had now. A name that couldn't be erased. A seat no one could take from her. A structure that wouldn't stand without her signature holding it up. And if someone like her ever comes across this story, quiet, competent, underestimated, she hopes they remember. You don't have to yell to be heard. You just have to know what's yours. And never stop protecting it. If this story struck a chord, hit subscribe to Revenge Tales. We tell stories for the ones they thought were already gone.